Okay, we're going to talk about kidney blood supply and answer the questions. What is the arterial supply of the kidney? What two capillary beds form a portal system with nephrons? And what's the venous drainage of the kidney? Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Morton, and I'm the noted anatomist. So here are the three topics: arterial supply, nephron portal system, venous drainage, and expanded. That's what it looks like. And we're going to start with arterial supply. Now, the renal artery is what provides blood to the kidney. It arises from the aorta at the level of the superior mesenteric artery. In this illustration, the inferior vena cava is on the right midline of the body, aorta is to the left of the midline of the body, and there's the superior mesenteric artery, and there the left renal artery is coming laterally at the level of the SMA from the aorta and also from the right side. However, notice the right renal artery courses deep to the inferior vena cava, and that's why the right renal artery is slightly longer than the left. And 20% of all the cardiac output goes to the kidneys via the renal arteries. That is a substantial amount of blood. The next branch is a segmental artery because it supplies segments of a kidney. So if that's the renal artery, there are the segmental arteries, and there are 5 different segmental arteries that supply 5 different vascular renal segments. For example, the superior segmental artery, or the anterior superior segmental artery, and the anterior inferior segmental artery. And then the posterior segmental artery, we have to go to a posterior surface of the kidney to see it. And then there's the inferior segmental artery. So there's 5 segmental arteries to 5 vascular renal segments. And each segmental artery is considered an end artery, which means they do not anastomose with adjacent branches. So here's the anterior superior segmental artery, and if we block it right there, that means its associated segment has ischemic damage. So from segmental artery, the next branch is called an interlobar artery because it supplies the lobes of the kidneys. And if there's one lobe and there's another lobe, interlobar means the artery goes between the lobes and then supplies the lobes. Well, what's a lobe? Well, it's a renal pyramid with its associated cap of renal cortex. The next branch is called the arcuate artery, and it gets its name because it arcs between the cortex and the medulla, and it gives rise to the interlobular arteries. If we take a lobe, and there we see all those branches are within the lobe interlobular artery, or it's radiating within the cortex. And off the interlobular artery, we have afferent glomerular arterial branches. Those are all afferent glomerular arterioles coming off of those interlobular arteries. So we now take a look at this nephron portal system, which is 2 capillaries in series. So the afferent glomerular arteriole there is coming off of the interlobular artery, and then let's superimpose a nephron on that, and there we have the afferent glomerular arteriole. And it supplies the glomerulus, afferent for arriving to, and its diameter helps control glomerular filtration rate, or GFR. Then afferent arteriole goes to the glomerulus, which is a capillary. It's the first capillary in this nephron portal system. It's where blood is filtered and then filtrate is formed. So here we have an illustration of renal corpuscle. There's the afferent glomerular arteriole supplying the glomerulus, and within each of those glomeruli, notice that top left one, it says plasma. Plasma, through hydrostatic pressure primarily, is forced through these fenestrations and filtration slits and podocytes, and the plasma filters from the glomerulus into Bowman space and is now called filtrate. And then the rest of the blood that doesn't get filtered goes out the efferent arteriole, exiting. So the glomerulus is that first capillary bed. Now the efferent glomerular arteriole, E for exiting, goes away from the glomerulus, and it supplies, so it's going blood away from the glomerulus, and its diameter also helps to control GFR. And this efferent arteriole, instead of going to as usually exiting a capillary is a venule, this is another arteriole which goes to the second capillary bed. This is the peritubular capillaries. This is the second capillary bed in that nephron portal system. And these capillaries are around the renal tubules, hence peri, around the tubules. and reabsorption and secretion take place. So let's blow this thing up, and there's the peritubular capillary. And this concept of reabsorption is when fluid or solutes from the renal tubule are reabsorbed back into the peritubular capillary, where in contrast, secretion is when solutes go from the peritubular capillary into the renal tubule. So here's renal tubule cells. On the left is the urinary lumen side where the filtrate is, and on the right is the peritubular capillary. So in the filtrate, if there's water or solutes like sodium or glucose, when they are reabsorbed, they go back into the peritubular capillary. In contrast, if you have things like ammonium or acids or bases, they are secreted. They go from the peritubular capillary into the filtrate within the renal tubules. So recall, we have two types of nephrons, a cortical nephron, primarily in the renal cortex, and these juxtamedullary nephrons. There's only 15% of all nephrons are those that go all the way down into the renal pyramids. Most all nephrons, of the millions of them in our kidneys, are cortical nephrons. And the nephron contains a portal system, two capillary beds in series. So I'm reviewing this. The glomerulus is capillary number 1, and blood exits through the efferent arteriole, and they go into the peritubular capillaries, capillary bed number 2. But those are cortical nephrons. The juxtamedullary nephrons have their own called vasa recta that go all the way down into the medulla. So these are capillaries that follow these long loops of Henle down into the renal medulla, where also reabsorption and secretion take place. And this is also where the counter-current mechanism occurs, is using the vasa recta with those long loops of Henle and that very salty interstitium. Okay, so the peritubular capillary, now blood exits from this peritubular capillary and it goes inside a venule, and the venules then go along the venous drainage. So let's talk about venous drainage next. So venous outflow is through interlobular to arcuate interlobar to renal veins. So there's an interlobular vein which goes into an arcuate vein which drains into these interlobar veins, and all interlobar veins drain into the renal vein which goes into the inferior vena cava. And so here we have a picture of the inferior vena cava, and there's the right renal vein draining the right kidney into the IVC, and there's the left renal vein draining also into the IVC. But notice, because the IVC, inferior vena cava, is located more on the right of the midline, that left renal vein is longer. And that left renal vein also has a couple of tributaries, like the left suprarenal vein draining the left adrenal gland, and the left gonadal vein draining the left gonad, as well as that as the superior mesenteric artery crosses over or anterior to that left renal vein. So the SMA crossing over the left renal vein. So if there's an aneurysm in the SMA or abdominal aorta in that region, it will constrict or squeeze off that left renal vein. So blood from the aorta goes to the renal arteries, all 20% of all cardiac output, and goes from segmental to interlobular arteries to these afferent glomerular arterioles that go to these millions of glomeruli, the first capillary. This is where filtration occurs. And the efferent arteriole exits and goes to the second capillary bed, either the peritubular capillaries or vasa recta. This is where reabsorption and secretion take place. And the venules drain these second capillary beds and go to the interlobular, to the interlobar veins, to the renal veins, to the IVC. And that, my friends, is kidney blood supply in a nutshell.